I'm Chad Grevalese with Aerolite TV and your host of the show, Connect Up. If you're looking to gain traction in your career or business, you're at the right place because here we talk about connection. You need to know how to connect with the right people in the right way so you can build valuable relationships that lead you to career success. We have conversations about how to find your voice in your career. I interview communication experts, time and focus masters, and everyday people who have stories to tell of challenges overcome, goals achieved, and how their inner and outer communication and ultimately their relationships accelerated their progress and elevated their journey. Success in life is just a collection of the right conversations with yourself and others. Connect up to a better version of yourself. Connect up to your goals and a brighter future. Disconnect from the things that are holding you back and connect your way to where you want to be. Welcome back. In today's episode, you get to hear from Claudia Martens all about public speaking. She was an accountant who became a person in sales, who then turned into a public speaker and a coach and a trainer. And she gives a lot of really great advice on communication. And in this episode, we're going to discuss the importance of communication if you want to advance your career and how it's no longer a soft skill. Communication is a vital skill. You cannot succeed without learning how to communicate. No matter who you are, no matter how outgoing you were growing up, everyone needs to learn the skill of communication, of true communication. She's going to talk to us about the difference between public speaking in front of a group and public speaking one-on-one, because both are technically public speaking, and how there's differences between the two, but also there's some universal things that are the same, that ultimately communication, the principles that apply when you're talking to somebody one-on-one, do carry over onto the stage. But she's also going to give us some really actionable tips of how to present better, how to give better presentations, how to find that balance between impromptu speaking and having a memorized speech, and how you balance that dance between preparing for something but also being open for improv moments as you are speaking. We're going to definitely get into that. And we're going to talk about authenticity, and we're going to talk about how to find your style, that everyone kind of connects to different things stylistically, and you have to figure out what that is for you. And she's going to tell us about the two different types of speakers that exist. And then you can evaluate for yourself, which one are you? So Claudia knows no bounds when it comes to expressing her confident voice. And in today's episode, she's definitely going to talk about the importance of finding your own voice and being able to express that. And from challenging the status quo of her Chinese culture, corporate culture, and believing that if you find something worth pursuing, you own your journey. Her background in being on performance stages in her childhood, saying she wanted to be a missionary at age 6, speaking out her values at the workforce, working as a consultant, a fashion stylist, and an entrepreneur, enables her to equip and empower others to be confident in public speaking. Currently, she's an accountant for a large property management company and started her public speaking school in 2017. She is absolutely passionate on her vision that no voice goes unheard. That is going to be the theme of today's episode, that no voice should ever go unheard. So with that said, I welcome Claudia to our show.
Hi.
So Claudia, tell us a little bit about your career story. Obviously, everyone's career story has so many, you can go on for days and days, but pick some key aspects about your story that are relevant, that kind of brought you to where you are today, and why you are passionate about communication, why you teach public speaking, and maybe what some of your previous experience, how it led you to what you're doing now, and why you're doing what you're doing now.
As you can see, I'm of Asian ethnicity, Chinese to be exact, and in that culture, there's only a few pathways to go once you finish high school, and it's the path of somewhere in the finance industry, in being in the medical industry, in law, and basically anything professional. So engineer would be included in that as well. And I come from a family of many accountants and some engineers. My brothers are engineers. And so when I was finishing up high school, I basically was in many ways strongly encouraged to pursue a career in business, particularly in accounting. And so I started my first job experiences in the accounting world. And not too long after that, I realized I'm a little bit different. I was a very talkative accountant to begin with. I actually like to converse with people. And that oftentimes didn't sit very well with the team. And I was not at my desk sometimes, and that also created concerns. So I then realized I actually stuck in with accounting for a good while, like a good decade, before I realized, I think it's time for a change. And so I jumped ship and went into retail sales. Actually got hired by 2 retail companies. One you may be familiar with, Lululemon. And it was actually at Lululemon where they recognized a lot of leadership potential in me, which when I'm an accountant, so leadership isn't really a quality they look for. And that's where I actually started my personal development journey. I would say absolutely without personal development, your growth will be limited. But when you are in an environment where people are wanting to not just help you grow on a skill set level, but on a potential level, the sky is truly the limit. And that's how I started to really find out what I wanted to do on this earth, or what I was really passionate about. And I would say a lot of it is being clear in my communication, but being able to connect with those I communicate to, because it's so important that the relationship is built. That's where trust is formed. That's where people actually feel like they're heard, or they feel like they truly matter, because you're showing that you care when you speak in a way that isn't just you doing all the speaking. Because for me, communication has a lot to do with the listening component as well. In 2012, I was at a personal development program, and I was asked a very specific and one of those questions that is truly life-changing, and that is, if you were to make a stand on this earth, what would that be? And after some time to think about what it is, because it has to be bigger than me. It's basically the audacious goals mentality is you have to create something bigger than yourself, that you would require people to work alongside of you in order to accomplish this goal. And so I had a statement, and the statement was, no voice gets left unheard. And that comes from a lot of personal experience where not only from a cultural point of view, but being female and also battling with corporate world, if you don't speak up, the silence will remain. And I realized that there is a choice to make when you want to speak up, but when you do, and you do it with courage, then there's no looking back. And I see that if I can help other people to get that confidence, which really starts with courage when in their speaking, and with me, public speaking isn't just speaking on stage or being on video camera or anything like that. It really involves the one-on-one, and then it transfers to group settings, and it really does start with you. What do you say to yourself first? And so through all this training and development and me stating what I was going to state in terms of what I'm going to do as a stand, it took me 5 years to get serious, because I would share with people, I wouldn't take any action. I would say, well, I can help people behind the scenes, and I wouldn't be out there speaking as much as I could. I had to deal with some of my own, the fear of success, I would say, more so than anything, that, what if this works? What am I going to do? And so anyway, 5 years later, a friend of mine said, you got to get this started. You got to start a platform of some kind. And that's really how Confident Claudia, which is the business that I created that is about empowering confident voices in public speaking, started. Is that I started with these platforms. It was really open, and people would register, but it would be talking about a topic that is, it would be more than just what do you want to do when you grow up kind of conversation. It would be like, the first one was about overcoming. What's your overcoming story? It's all based on stories, actually. So I really like to pull the story out of people, because it is the stories that truly connect one another. It's really what connects us all, is when we realize our stories are maybe not that different.
Yeah, that's really great. That's why I love asking about people's stories even at the beginning of the show, because then we can really see how we relate to the underlying themes of the story, and how your story is completely unique, but the theme of discovering who you really are and where you want to be is just so universal, of just being in a place where you're like, I don't fit in here, but where would I fit in? And you start spiraling onto this journey of learning and connecting with different mentors. And that was kind of like me with just not being just doing video editing and videography. And I was very much the technician, and I didn't feel like it fit with what I want. I wanted to speak. I wanted to write. There's things I wanted to say. There's things I had to say. And, that's a part of why I started the show. And that personal development journey is something that hopefully everyone gets on, and it obviously looks different for everyone. But when you brought up I love how you talked about public speaking starts with just the one-on-one, that we don't often think of it like that. We often think of, on a stage in front of 1,000 people. But if we can't master the one-on-one, then how can we expect to connect with 1,000 people? And ultimately, the principles are just the same. It's just everyone in one room. So what are some ways that you connect with somebody that do, I guess, transfer onto the stage? What are some tips you have for how you can really create that connection with the person?
That's a really good question. Self-awareness, self-discovery, and self-expression. And all three work together typically, because when I ask an engaging question, for example, if I ask the person, can you share a story of an overcoming that you've experienced, then there would be, if they don't know really where to start, it would be like, share a little bit about the backstory. You could say, before any of this happened, this is where I was at. I was alone, confused, or I was young and naive. But you could start like being honest about just the state of being you were at, and then go into what did that overcoming experience look like through words. And they would describe, and it would be using a lot of descriptive words, because facts and stating things is becoming very old school. And I think we're catching on as, it's not just audience, but just people, like, we know that that's not how humans speak. We know that we relate better if we actually share from the heart, and that it isn't rehearsed so much that it sounds almost robotic. So I really encourage people to try to be open and flexible enough that you may be impromptu in some of what you're saying, and then of course know what you're speaking about so that the structure is still there. But really, I like to tie in the component of being authentic, because your story is it's like no other people, but to also be able to express it in a way that is you as well, because we all have our different ways of expression. I use certain little tips, like if you connect well with quotes, definitely use it. Use it as a beginning. Use it as your starting point. If you have a relatable story that relates to your story, that's another good place to start as well. So I do also, in terms of the structure, really have them understand what a beginning, middle, and end is, and how the ending actually ties into the beginning, because it is a package. And oftentimes, if we get started and it gets going, we don't know when to end. And so there's that training too on how to transition in between, and doing different types of exercises, sometimes drills. For some of the more intensive classes, I would be like, okay, repeat, okay, repeat, okay, repeat. Like, it would be different versions of an intro, for example. And then if their body, they have, say, 3 examples, like, because I really believe in the key of 3, which is Carmine Gallo's, one of his formula. That's part of actually TED Talk, how they are structuring their speeches, if they're actually going to use the key of 3. But you always want to have maximum 3 points. And then developing those 3 points with a concise, either a story or elaborate, but within a certain time frame. And then how does the body and the intro connect? And then how does the body tie into the ending? And the ending usually ties back into the beginning. And so the structure can be seen, but when you're practicing the different parts, you start to build on the concept that it is, I call it a present. And so you got the gift wrap, you got the bow on top, and you got the box and the goodies or the gift. And the gift is your body of the presentation. And then the gift wrap would be the actual structure of it, so that there's actually a beginning, middle, and end. The bow would be the ending. And really, basically, the intro is starting to put the present into the box. So I give a little analogy so people can visualize that this is meant to be a shape, or it actually has to be an actual structure before you start speaking.
Definitely. That's good to know, and that kind of helps separate for us how there is a difference between one-on-one speaking and public speaking, that there's definitely a lot more structure, a lot more prep. with one-on-one speaking, it's basically just always impromptu for the most part, and you're just listening and conversating back and forth. So with that, like, you talk about preparation and having that different structure. How do you find the balance between, I guess, memorizing a speech versus impromptu talking to the audience because you're listening to them and trying to pick up on what they need? Because, like, especially with something like a TED Talk, and you have just so much prep in the structure, you have to stick to a certain time. How do you not come across as just memorizing something? And how often do people literally just spill out what they memorize versus like mix it up? Or how do we, I guess it just depends on the person. I mean, what do you have to say on that?
Yeah, I've noticed that there are two typical types. One that do not like structure, and therefore they just speak very, like, they feel very comfortable with impromptu. And then the other kind, where if they don't memorize or they don't have something in front of them, which actually is a prohibit, that's a non-negotiable. You do not bring papers in my class. The learning is, or the stretching would be, can you speak without having what I would call a safety blanket? Because life doesn't really allow that. And especially, you could be speaking to a group of people at a moment's notice, and you need to be prepared on what you're going to say to a larger group than a one-on-one scenario where it's a bit more impromptu. But what happens if there's 5 people asking the same question, and they may have different types of questions after the first question? What are you going to do? And that's a common challenge for those who struggle with the structure. I have very high level, quite honestly, a few accountants that have come to my platforms because the accounting world has changed as well, especially the very high level accountants. They're now required to present, and they're required to present not just internally, but externally. And a lot of them are going to the Toastmasters world, but then they realize they probably need a little bit more. And so they're curious about what I offer. And so for those who are very structured, I take paper away. And so that's already something that they're not comfortable with, and give them chances to just speak impromptu, because that is so unfamiliar for them. Like, if they don't have it prepared, they don't even know how to think on the spot. We can tell when someone memorizes, because they're looking on the ground or looking up, or they're not looking at the audience because they're thinking about, oh, what to say next. And so it is pretty obvious when someone's memorizing. And so I just call them out, and I'm like, that's your comfort zone. But if you were to say it a different way in one sentence, what would that be? And that would be an impromptu exercise. And it would be an exercise to be concise as well, because structured people tend to give a way more detail than required to drive the point. And the ones that are very abstract, they can go on and on and on, but they go into rabbit trails. And so the exercise for them is to give them a visualization exercise. Those usually help. Is that, okay, you paint me a picture right now where it is you're going. And then they usually are able to give me that. And then I would say, okay, so if you were to break it down, beginning, middle, and end, how would you do that? So it's almost like they need to reconstruct and find one point, because often they have multiple points. And so the development for those is, okay, you got to pick one that is really, really connected to you. And let's make it bigger. Let's form it. Let's break it down so that there are some structured parts, but then some flexibility for you to add in your little natural flair of being a bit more impromptu, but it's still within the same theme. And that is in a, like, the structured portion helps with that in the class. The impromptu would give them the ability to be intentional with the way that they are impromptu, if that makes sense. Like, they're not just speaking different things all over, but there's actually an underlying point to it all.
Gotcha. So there's definitely that balance there then between the impromptu and between having a lot of prep. But it sounds like it does just take that practice of knowing how to put together a talk, put together a presentation, but to still know how to leave room for that impromptu, because you do need to have room for that, because that's how you really connect with the audience. So you're not just, like you said, giving a memorized speech. What do you what is your opinion on having like PowerPoints in the background and things like that? You talk about not having papers, but if somebody has visuals, I know you can definitely feel disconnected if you're too attached to your PowerPoint. But like, how do you suggest people approach the dance between a PowerPoint and engaging with the audience if they do have that as like visuals and stuff?
Yeah, so visuals and actually using props is another component of when I help them with structure, because to become a dynamic speaker, you can't just be standing there and speaking and using different tones of your voice. Like, I mean, that goes only so far, whether it's PowerPoint, whether it's using an actual object, whether it's using a song, because it really engages. I call it the 5 sense engagement, which is also from that same book that I referenced. It's actually How to Talk Like Ted is the name of the book, from Carmine Gallo. And he really, you'll see this in TED Talks too, how if it's a PowerPoint, it's very simplistic. There's a rule on how many words are allowed for TED Talk PowerPoint presentation. And so I strongly encourage that people want to do that they follow that model. And so less words, more pictures. And if it's words summarized to one, because being concise and clear is also another thing I develop, and also tough for those who are very structured, because they don't know how to reduce it to say 5 words or to, like I would say, if anything you're saying, if you can't reduce it to a tagline, that's too much. And taglines are maximum like 8 words or what, right? So same thing with PowerPoint. And if you have only one image, you don't need to look at it, because you know what that image is. So if you're going to talk about a picture of something about your life, and then you're going to share a story about that picture, the picture is going to tell its own story from a visual standpoint. But when you talk about it, when you share from it, the audio senses start to engage as well. And so you're engaging them in 2 different ways. Now, if you have a picture and then you also add a song and then speak, then it just engages with the audience even more. Really connect with what you're talking about, because when you're connected, then the audience will connect as well, because it's basically the energy that you're giving off. They feel it. If you're giving off nervous energy, they're going to feel it. But if you're giving off, I'm really passionate about this, or I'm very concerned about this situation, or that this is a matter that is very important to me, people that are listening or watching are going to relate to it. They're going to be captivated. And that is some of the ways that I help them to realize the difference.
That's really great. Thank you for that. You bring up like how when we're really nervous, people can feel it. And I wanted to, let's just pretend that I'm somebody who has a presentation coming up in front of a large group of people, and it's maybe for work or something, and I'm really being paralyzed by the fear of that. What would you suggest I do to overcome that fear so that I'm not up there having all this nervous energy that's making people disconnect?
So that is a practice thing. I definitely have had some that had like stage fright as a real fear, and they realize that from their own personal development journey that if they don't actually keep facing the fear, it's not going to go away. And it may not even go away 100%, even if you are practiced and have practiced a ton, but at least you're going to be able to manage it. And so for those who are jittery and feeling the way they are, like, it doesn't hurt to just tell the audience, I'm really nervous right now. And so here I am, and I'm going to share something very exciting with you. But to break the ice, they know you're there, and you may be freaking out. They certainly don't want to be there anyway. And so that understanding that the fear of public speaking is universal. Nobody wants to stand out there. It's actually against our instinct to be out there like that, because it actually I don't want to go into the psychology, and we can spare those details for another time, but there's actually a physiological response in any human being to stand out in front, that they want to run away. And that is just what it is. And over time, you just got to be with it. So I call it, take the time to, maybe you got to breathe. This actually happens in the acting world as well. I do some acting courses on the side, more so to bring those techniques onto the public speaking platforms. There's a lot of acting techniques, especially with calming nerves and also accepting that you just may need a little break to just center yourself. That's okay, because people actually don't notice how long you may be taking a pause. I mean, there is, of course, if it's very long, they'll notice, but just give yourself that grace to just take another breath, even if you have to say, look, I may be shaky at first because I'm really nervous. And I really have something to say because I wouldn't be here otherwise. Just to be a little bit honest would bring that vulnerability of who you are as a person for people to understand, like, if this is your first or second time, or you've had some traumatic experiences with speaking, you're speaking up here anyway. That takes a lot of courage. We as humans can relate to that. We know that being up there like that, it takes a lot of courage because it's a stand. Like literally, you're standing out in front of people, but you are also standing for something. And that, if we don't, if we embrace that, that's why we're there. And also part of even the prep work on how to know that, why you actually wanted to be on stage, or why do you want to speak on a certain topic. What I say to my students or participants in the one-day events that are maybe not taking more longer-term programs, is to have them really connect to why you here. And why do you want to be developing the skill of public speaking? Or why do you want to share a story that maybe you've kept within yourself for so long, but the story is going to make a difference for so many people? There's a reason, right? And if the why is bigger than the fear of you having to spill it out or speak it out, it gives them the perspective that is almost like it's their responsibility to be up there. And for them to not be up there would be a disservice.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's sometimes it is as simple as just taking that time to breathe. And I know that definitely having a why. I used to be very paralyzed by public speaking, and I was just very shy overall. And being able to have a why and a purpose behind why I wanted to speak definitely helped me have that confidence. And so that does make a huge difference. And really just telling yourself, like, I'm not going to die. We have these symptoms as if we're going to die. And, telling ourselves those things can really, really definitely help. And so thanks for all the tips you shared on public speaking. I want to kind of close up this conversation by you just giving us just kind of a brief explanation of how you see, what importance you see communication in just developing our careers. Like for us to get anywhere in our career, what role does communication play, and just how important is it?
It's critical. It is now becoming the number one skill, communication. The concept of soft skills is almost becoming irrelevant when it comes to communication, because it is not a soft skill anymore. It's actually a fundamental and a critical skill to have. If you don't have the ability to communicate in a concise or in a clear manner, for you to be able to ask for what you want to do, or for you to ask for things that are beyond I would call it being reasonable, because you got to ask for the unreasonable in order to be able to propel yourself to reach your potential. How are you going to be able to ask that question if you don't even have the ability to ask the question within yourself and to practice communicating with yourself on what is it that you believe in, and what is it that you truly value, and what is it that you think is important to you, and to have those internal conversations first, because that's where it begins. You got to communicate with yourself. You got to communicate with your own alignment to, if you've got beliefs in what you're doing, say at your work, or even at a job where you're not too sure if you're a fit. I mean, those are the conversations that need to happen. And usually that starts within yourself, and then you may start talking with a trusted friend or someone that can relate with you, and then you communicate and you actually have a conversation. And that's communication as well. Like being able to even to share what's going on with you is another component of it. And if that's tough, because there's people also that I've encountered that small talk for them is almost like trivial. but that's what enables you to be able to start building those tools to have conversations with other people, and ultimately being able to share that on stage, and not just have your piece to share what you want to share on stage, but being able to engage in the Q&A, because those are now unavoidable. There's going to be a Q&A if you're a speaker, that you're going to be able to provide the answers, even if you may not have if you don't even know the questions beforehand, or there's questions that you may have known, but there's extra ones that you don't get thrown off. I mean, that's all part of the impromptu side of training yourself with communication as well. I mean, it's like a number one skill it's becoming, because whether it's interviewing, whether it's before you get interviewed, whether it's prospecting, whether it's keeping a lead that you have, or a client that you have, with client retention, providing customer service, is all surrounded with communication.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those where you can't get away from it.
Yeah, you really can't. You're not exempt anymore. It's I love how you said it's no longer a soft skill. It's not one of those skills that only entrepreneurs develop or only public speakers develop. Literally everyone, from being an accountant, who you were, to a public speaker, entrepreneur, business owner, actor, we all need to learn how to communicate, because like you said, even from just getting a job interview to ultimately, when you know how to communicate, people trust you. When people trust you, they give you opportunity. When they give you opportunity, you find more fulfillment in your life and success. And it all, I mean, not only just in your career, but when you know how to communicate, you keep your marriage together, you have better family relationships. I mean, literally, it is the thing. And communication needs to be a course that every elementary school kid, every middle school, like it needs to be one of the main subjects. We have math, we have history, we have science. We have these main subjects that are important, but communication is definitely more important than all of that. Because without communication, who cares what you know about science and history? You can't do anything with it. And so thanks for telling us just how important it is. And Claudia, you shared a lot of great stuff with us today, and I want you to tell our audience, where can we connect with you? Where can we learn more from you?
I guess the best way to go is just my website. It's confidentclaudia.com, and all the programs and different types of platforms I offer are on the website. I do have Meetup, and it's more local from where I'm from. I'm from Canada, and I do have a Meetup group, but I'm actually about to launch an online platform to teach some of this public speaking, but it will be through Zoom, because I definitely want to see how you present, and it would be something that would be a conversation on how you're dealing with your goals and where you're at, and whether you're on track or you're not, and just to evaluate. Because I also, for those of you who may know who John C. Maxwell is, I'm a certified John C. Maxwell coach, trainer, speaker, and teacher, and I would love to also integrate his material, which is more leadership based, but also the difference between goal setting and growth setting, because having a growth focused trajectory is very different than goals. And the conversation for this upcoming online platform is really for those who are interested, to have that conversation through public speaking, to really take control of take stock of how you've been doing with goal setting, and whether you may meet some goals, and then you may set some new goals, and then it's new goals, but then how are you doing as a person through it all? Is there any reflection of, did your character grow? Did your view of different perspectives of life grow? Did your communications grow? Your communication skills grow? Or your ability to have those meaningful relationships, were they growing as well? And so growth perspective has a lot more to do with who you are inside, so that you are able to express out it to those who are around you on the outside. And there's certain things about that may be missed, and we may not put ourselves down way too easily, thinking that, I can't set any goal and I can't meet any of them. Along the way, you're learning so much, and you never really took the time to evaluate the learning or the opportunities of the lessons that you've learned, and how that's going to benefit you in other areas of life. And so that, stay tuned for that. But otherwise, you can find more about who I am, and I'm quite active on social media as well. And so if you just Google Confident Claudia, all those options will be available to you.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Claudia, and we're glad to have you on our show today.
Thank you.